This is the Bottom Line Sports Show with Gerald Brown and Rick Mahorn.
Imagine you trade a Chet Holmgren for a Giannis Antetokounmpo.
These guys are athletic as you know what, and you go like, oh my gosh, where's the fundamentals? Where's the pass first mentality? That's not in the league anymore.
And now here's your host, Gerald Brown and Rick Mahorn.
What's up, everybody? Gerald Brown here. Rick Mahorn is on assignment, if you will, enjoying the offseason of the NBA. But you know what? Joining me right now is a gentleman that, again, knows a thing or two about MLB, baseball, and playing for, again, one of those high-profile organizations in the New York Yankees, three-time World Series champion. Jim Leyritz is joining me to discuss about this Major League Baseball trade deadline reactions. Jim, thank you so much for taking some time out of your busy schedule. I'll get right to it. So much was made about the whole Tarek Skubal trade to the Dodgers, and a lot of people were saying that this is the demise, which will inevitably lead to Major League Baseball having a lockout work stoppage next year. In your estimation, first and foremost, on the baseball diamond, what are your thoughts on Skubal going to the Dodgers, and how do you see him fitting in with that team?
Well, you know, I always talk about how much I miss Mr. Steinbrenner. And you know what? I think he's being reincarnated on the West Coast. Listen, God bless them, man. Is it not a good look for what's going on in baseball right now? It's probably not. But you know what? It's amazing that not only do they get these players actually want to go there. And it reminds me, like I said, it reminds me of the late Yankees and the Steinbrenner era Yankees. Everybody wanted to play for George. They all heard all the horror stories, but you know what? At the end of the day, he put together some pretty damn good teams, and it's one of the things I think I see the Dodgers doing. But I also saw the Dodgers get swept by the Red Sox this week. So, it's one of those things that, okay, good thing for I wouldn't say small market because Boston's not a small market, but good for a team showing that they can still beat the Dodgers. So, it's one of those things. But looking at what the Yankees did or didn't do, as all the Yankee fans are really pissed off about today, it's you wonder, you shake your head a little bit, you realize that this is no longer the George Steinbrenner era Yankees. And people got to get over that. People got to understand that this is a new realm, a new different thing. And Cashman's been one of those guys that has not really, him and Hal both have just not really wanted to go deep or drive deep into things where they feel like they have to give up too much to get something that's not guaranteed. And I think that's what you saw. I think I can guarantee you that they were in on Skubal. They were in on these catchers that they really needed help at the catching position. But I think the price that people that were looking to get was just too much. And the Dodgers have so much abundant, not only of great major league players, but a great minor league system that I would say there's probably at least 100 minor leaguers with the Dodgers that you would take before you would take some of the Yankee prospects. So I just think it was a losing battle to try to get him. But I was surprised, honestly, Gerald, that they did not go after a catcher or, they got another left-handed bat, which is surprising. But I also look at it from a different standpoint of now you're going to have Garcia. You're going to have, if Stanton comes back healthy, if Judge comes back, you're going to have guys on your bench like a Darryl Strawberry, like a Jim Leyritz, like a Tim Raines, like Joe Torre had on his bench when we had all the success that we did in the 90s. And that's something that's been missing from this ball club for a long, long time. So this could be something that, like I said, if these guys come back healthy, that it could be a good thing for the Yankees to have these players on the bench that are ready, the Paul Goldschmidts, the guys that are just ready to come in and can perform, because they should be playing every day somewhere else.
Yeah, you mentioned about that, and one of the things, obviously, Jim, you were very successful in the postseason, and not only having moments, you hit big home runs that really, really go down in history. Obviously, AKA the King, all that stuff. What helped you with that? Why made it so simple and stuff? Because you're talking about now guys adjusting to a different role when and if they do come back, but there's pressure. And it's even ratchet up to another level when you play in New York. Why, what was the key ingredient that helped you be able to be so successful in those moments during the postseason?
Well, and I always talk about Pete Rose's comment to me about, Jimmy, the pitcher is 60 feet 6 inches from the time you go to spring training to the first game of the season to the World Series. So the bottom line is that doesn't change. So if all I concentrate on is me against that pitcher, none of the other stuff going on around me, whether it's, like you said, spring training, whether it's the first game, none of that I get caught up in, because my job is to hit the pitcher. And I think that helped me. But also, Gerald, most of my career, if I didn't play well, I didn't play the next day. So for me, there wasn't really an opportunity to go, okay, I know I got 600 bats this year, maybe 50 or 100 at bats I'm not going to really worry about too much because I got more coming. I didn't have that luxury. I had that, okay, if I sit for a week and I'm going up against Randy Johnson or Mark Langston or a tough lefty, if I'm not ready to get a couple hits, I'm not going to play the next day or the next day after. But if I do get a couple hits, maybe I get a chance. So I think part of my whole career, like I said, was under that kind of pressure and playing in New York. I always talk about my very first visit, Gerald, to Yankee Stadium as a minor leaguer for Double-A Albany. I sat there and I watched. It was Don Mattingly's heyday. And Don Mattingly came up to hit. He was the guy, the hit king and everything else. All right. He came up the first time at bat. They announced his name. Me and Dave Eiling were sitting Dave Eiling was one of my teammates in Double-A. We came down for the day. We're watching the game, and all of a sudden Mattingly comes up, and they're like, now batting number 23, Don Mattingly. And the crowd goes nuts, and they're just, yeah, we love you, MVP. He was having a great season, all this stuff. And the first time up, he laces a double in the gap, and everybody's just cheering him. 2 innings later, he comes up again with men on second and third. They're down 3-1, and he ends up popping a ball up to second base. And they are just screaming every expletive you could ever think of. And Dave Eiling looked at me and goes, dude, if they're doing this to him, we got no chance of ever playing. So I think that has a little bit to do with it also, Gerald. Playing in that environment, you don't waste an at bat. You don't give up an opportunity, and you're always prepared when your name is called. I think that had a lot to do with it too.
Yeah, would you apply that same advice to the Yankees making a move, bringing up highly touted young rookie and George Lombard Jr.? He's going to be making his major league debut. Would you apply that same type of advice to him, as well as some of the other Garcia, Ramos that are coming in? Some of the guys and stuff like that will be thrust into a situation where the Yankees are looking over their shoulders. They're actually looking up at the Tampa Bay Rays, but now they're looking over their shoulders at the Boston Red Sox. Would that be the sort of sound advice you would give them, but more importantly, George Lombard Jr.?
Well, here's the thing I always talk about. George Lombard Jr.'s father, I played with. George played when I was in the minor leagues or in the major leagues, and I knew George pretty well. He's growing up in this game forever. One of the hardest things as a guy like myself that I didn't grow up in the game was when I faced a Roger Clemens, when I faced a Nolan Ryan. I remembered the name. I was scared of that name. I knew that name was a legend, and I was a little bit intimidated by some of those things. George Lombard Jr., Ken Griffey Jr. was around it all the time. He could care less who was pitching, who was doing whatever, because he already heard those names. It wasn't anything out of the ordinary. I think George Lombard Jr. has a huge advantage. And I guarantee you, when he got called up, his father was the first one he called. And his dad said, son, it ain't any different than where you are now. The guy's 60 feet 6 inches. Get ready. Go up there. Stay within yourself, but just go out and play your game. Your game is what got you there. Keep doing it. And I think that is going to be maybe an advantage.
All right, go ahead. Yeah, you were just talking.
But I do think that's a huge advantage for Lombard. And but I'm sorry, I was kind of surprised just from the standpoint that they just did this to Volpe and they watched him fall flat on his face. I thought maybe there might be a little hesitancy, but again, maybe Cashman's thinking the same thing. He's grew up around the game his whole life. He's been around this. This isn't anything overwhelming for him. Let's hope he comes up and just plays his game.
Do you think perhaps maybe down the line you look at Volpe might be an opportunity to play and be moved to second baseman at second base if they don't re-sign Jazz Chisholm and stuff like that? Did you see something like that perhaps have a silver lining, if you will?
I think so, but I also think you have to understand this, that even though the trade deadline just passed, there's going to be a lot more trades made between now and October 1st. And you know what? It's just a matter of them getting through some waivers and some things like that. I got traded 3 or 4 times late in the season. You know, it doesn't, even though the trade deadline, the big names are off the list, but you're still going to have trades made. And I do think, and I said this before on Craig Carton's show and Sid Rosenberg's show, I think the bottom line is Anthony Volpe needs to change the scenery. I think if he's the guy that if he gets out of the system, if he goes and lets his natural ability take over and plays in another system, I do think he ends up becoming a really good ball player, maybe even to a point, a great ball player. I don't think his days are over, but I do think that possibly he might be included in a trade in the next month or so for the Yankees to get maybe another bullpen arm or get something to fill in that they need off their bench, possibly.
Yeah, you know, Jim, when you talk about obviously, you know, the Yankees, they've had these struggles, right? They've recently just come off a stretch where they just couldn't even score, a lot of things. And you look at it, the fact is that, yeah, there's a lot of players that you don't have those sort of guys in the lineup that pitchers have to worry about, you know, in terms of Judge and Stanton and even Bellinger. But if there's a silver lining, your thoughts on just really, you know, Spencer Jones, who I think has really just come up and really kind of solidified himself. And then, you know, perhaps, you know, a lot of the fans and stuff, you know, yeah, they're fanatics in terms of saying, hey, include him in this deal, include him in that deal. But if you look at long-term and stuff like that, these guys are on lower salaries, but they're also pivotal players that could help the organization down the stretch. Your thoughts on perhaps guys like a Spencer Jones and his growth, and do you think that he's perhaps up for good now that obviously some of these moves that have made and he's kind of playing on a regular basis?
Yeah, no, listen, I think it's one of those things. It's you know, if you get benefits if you perform. And right now, if you're in the Yankee organization, you have to perform because there is no time to give somebody some opportunity to grow and everything else. And, you know, you could just see that with Jason Dominguez. They just sent him down. This guy looked like he was coming around and things were happening. And then all of a sudden he kind of fell backwards. And you know what? He's the expendable part. You know, those are the things that you have to understand. But the bigger picture that I also look at too is we as Yankee fans, we want to win now.
Right.
We want to win now. And all we're thinking about is, oh, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? You know, but when you bring in a Luis Garcia, when you bring in some other players like that they possibly might be bringing in, you got to also look towards next year and the year after when maybe Giancarlo Stanton's gone for good. All right. And maybe, you know, Paul Goldschmidt ends up leaving, you know, probably won't come back next year. So now you have another first baseman. Now you have another DH. Now you have some of the things that now you don't have to replace Stanton if you just want to get rid of him because the guy obviously can't play much. I don't think you're going to sit around next year and wait till October to wait for Stanton to get healthy. You know, so I think there's some things that the Yankees are doing too that they're looking at their future. They're looking at, okay, yeah, this maybe we can pull it off this year, but it's really hard, Gerald, when you look at how good this pitching staff is.
Yes.
And that opportunity they have right now with the staff being as good as it is and to possibly win right now. So I do think this Lombard situation is going to be very interesting. But I also think this, I don't know if this is going to happen, but I know being in the clubhouse, being on the field, when an organization doesn't make a trade for the most glaring thing that they need is a catcher, and they don't make a trade for a catcher, and they tell you, Austin Wells, we believe in you. You got to remember, and I'm a catcher. This is why I look at it a different way. He's done a hell of a job with the pitching staff. The pitching staff has been pitching great. So you don't want to change that, even though maybe you do get a little more offense. You don't want to screw that up. So I do think, in a way, by them not trading for a catcher, maybe it gets Austin Wells some confidence in his bat to say, you know what, they believe in me. I'm going to work harder, and I'm going to try to figure this thing out because I know what I'm doing defensively. I got to try to figure out offensively what I can do. And hopefully that kind of mental adjustment, saying, hey, they believe in me, will help him down the stretch. I mean, last night he hits a home run. He has 2 hits.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a confidence thing. Maybe we haven't seen that all year. Maybe this is the one thing that, hey, we have faith in you. We're not trading for a catcher. We believe in you. Go out there and show that we made the right choice. Maybe that's a way that he steps up and changes things.
Yeah. How worried are you about the Boston Red Sox? They have been hot like fish grease, and I've always questioned, even in basketball, it's all about the timing when teams go on these sort of long winning streaks, and then in terms of how much can that carry over to the postseason. They're hitting a stride where they were hot before the All-Star break, and then they picked up kind of right where they left off, Jim. And, to go into Chavez Ravine and Dodger Stadium and sweep the Dodgers, especially after the way they have looked against the AL East. How worried are you about the Boston Red Sox, who seem to figured out everything after the Alex Cora firing? How worried are you about them?
Well, I mean, you have to be concerned because they also made a couple moves that are going to strengthen them a little bit. So yeah, I mean, you definitely got to look at them, and you got to remember too. Tampa Bay went out and got Freddie Peralta, and they got they improved themselves, and they're 2.5 games in front. So the Yankees have an uphill battle, but like I mentioned before, when you have the pitching that they have, it really helps this August and this September for these guys, because there's not going to be too many, I don't think, long streaks of them losing games, because these pitchers are going to keep them in the ball game, and they have improved themselves somewhat offensively. And if Aaron Judge does come back, and Stanton, I kind of hope Stanton doesn't come back, but if he does, hopefully you get a little bit of offense out of some of those guys. But I really do think that this is going to be a 3-team race between now and the end of the year, and it could be anybody. And Boston has done such a great job of putting themselves right back in the thick of things.
Yeah, you mentioned about Stanton and stuff like that. Obviously, and look, no disrespect to Giancarlo Stanton, he's an unbelievable player, but this stage of his career, it just seems like he's been kind of like that stopgap, because you don't have the flexibility in your lineup to move around a lot of players and say, well, look, Aaron Judge is at that stage of his career. You can't really track him out there for 120, 140 games and stuff like that. He's a DH. But if you have Stanton, you're obviously stuck with him being in that DH spot. When you look in terms of just Stanton, who's missed a ton of time and stuff, and we know calf strains are very, very tricky and slow healing injury. When you look at that, you just mentioned, obviously, how do you see him fitting in with this team? And obviously, do you look at the team and say maybe at some point they're going to have to just cut their losses and start moving forward in a different direction?
Well, Gerald, Bob Costas once said, you can send this guy to a resort in the spring and summer, just bring him back in October. I think Giancarlo Stanton, for what he's done in the postseason, has kind of earned that same type of thing. And I think that's maybe what the Yankees are banking on. That, hey, if we can get this guy back maybe the end of August, beginning of September, and he can show that he's got a little bit of life left, he is a proven postseason player, this is when we really need him. And that could be what they're doing. I don't know that for sure. But that is one thing that I think when you look at a Giancarlo Stanton, despite the injuries, despite everything that's going on, he is a proven postseason player, and maybe you're banking on that a little bit.
Yeah. Jim, before I let you get on out of here, I know I've asked you this before, and I'm just, and forgive me for asking you again, but obviously with so much of the hoopla, like we alluded to early on with the Scooby trade and the Dodgers, and people are really just talked about the demise. And we're headed to a space where obviously, both the Players Association will put out stuff saying they won't agree to a salary cap. The owners have put out, through the media that they're prepared to lose the season. From obviously a former player, and obviously being on the side of the broadcast and understanding the fans, how detrimental would this be to the game if Major League Baseball has once again another work stoppage? Because look, we're seeing the growth of UFC, MMA right before our eyes. We've seen WNBA expand into the summer. I don't know how much baseball would be able to recover. But from your vantage point, how disappointing, and more importantly, how detrimental would this be to the overall game itself if we have a work stoppage after this season?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, I've talked about this a couple of times in different interviews, one of the things that's different now than it was when we had the strike in '94 was we were only making 8 to 10 million, which I know sounds like a lot of money, but the highest paid player was $7 or $8 million. And one of the reasons why they got us to stay behind the strike and not cross the picket lines or not put extra pressure on the union to get a deal done is because they told us someday guys will make 20 to 30 million. And we were like, no way, that's never going to happen. And we see that has happened. In today's game, Gerald, $30 to $50 million players are almost a regularity right now.
Yeah.
If you go on strike, I don't think the union's going to be able to tell the players someday guys are going to be making $100 million a year. I don't think that's going to happen. I do think that there's going to have to be more concessions on the side of the players this time around. And I do believe you'll probably get more support. The owners will get more support from the players because the money is so big right now in the game of baseball. And I would think from the owner standpoint, I wouldn't want a work stoppage either, because right now the money for them is as good as it's ever been. And because of this deferred payments and all these things that they've kind of started to figure out, there's a whole different ballgame being able to be played now to get better players to defer the money. So I think there's a lot of things that are happening. I hope to God, though, Gerald, as a baseball fan, as a former player and somebody that was part of the unions and everything, I hope to God there is no strike, because I think it could be the worst thing that could ever happen. And it's really going to be really hard to bring back to fans when you say I'm making $30 to $50 million a year and you should feel sorry for me. It was a little bit different, 7 or 8 million now versus, 50 to 60 million. So I'm hoping there is no strike. I hope that both sides work this out, but I do think the players are probably going to have to be more willing to give up more because the amount of money that's in the game today.
Yeah, and look, I think both sides have stand to lose a lot on this, but it's interesting. In so many times in past and previous work stoppages, lockouts, strikes, whatever it is, to define it, it's always fans would sort of gravitate against the players. And I never could understand that, because they're owners. Like if you look at the Pittsburgh Pirates, they're crying broke. They don't, we've never seen an investment of money put into the organization to say spend, spend, spend. And granted, yes, there is a certain revenue sharing system that is in place. Clearly, the television money is not the same for the local TV money in Pittsburgh than it is for New York and some of the other major markets. But I do understand that, but I've never understood why there's always a finger pointed at the players as opposed to the owners, and yet they're making all of this money. But there is some significant changes that need to be made. But look, baseball's come off 2 tremendous World Series. I think it would just be so detrimental to the sport itself if they have a work stoppage. In 20 seconds or less, any update on you perhaps performing in the old timers game? You can't do it.
No, not now. I listen, I'll miss being with my teammates. I really wish they would have invited me, but the powers that be don't seem to think that that's ready, that it's time yet. So I will be patient and I will continue to wait.
Yeah. Well, listen, Jim, you're always a fan favorite. And you know what? More importantly, a quality person. Above
Thank you,
all, and again, just having that opportunity to see you speaking, talking about your book, and really, really connecting. That's what makes you you. And you know what? Again, regardless of whatever may have been said or whatever, hey, a setback is always a setup for a comeback. And you know what? Thank you so much for your time. Always a pleasure to get your ear for a few minutes and get your insight. Enjoy the rest of this baseball season. Definitely look forward to talking down the line.
All right, Gerald. Thanks so much, and we'll talk again. Thank you.
Okay, sounds good. Appreciate it.